Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere vast, quiet, and cold enough to make your eyelashes freeze shut. Imagine yourself standing in the middle of a great empty steppe, grassland that stretches farther than the eye can see. There's no forest for shelter, no mountains to block the wind, and the sky is doing that big, endless sky thing it only really does over Mongolia. The horizon is a clean line, painted with shades of gray and ice blue. Your breath fogs up immediately, your boots crunch over hard-packed snow, and the only sign of life is a faint puff of smoke curling from the center of a low, round structure. That's your destination, the yurt, and you probably won't survive this winter, not without the tricks that nomadic Mongolians figured out centuries ago, because this land doesn't care how tough you are or how many layers you brought from REI. Out here, survival is more about design than willpower. And the yurt? It's a masterpiece of portable architecture, ancient, understated, and precisely tuned to laugh in the face of minus 40 degrees. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world we're falling asleep together. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the frostbitten earth, feeling the sting of the wind bite into your cheeks. A pair of goats blink at you from the distance. There's no fence, no mailbox, no driveways, just you and the steppe. The land feels ancient in a way cities can never imitate, an endless plain that remembers empires. And in the middle of it all, squatting like a woolly moon pod, is your first yurt. It's round, obviously, low to the ground. Steam curls from a small chimney poking out the top. The white felt covering looks soft enough to sleep on, but tough enough to stop a blizzard. You approach slowly, your boots leaving shallow prints in the thin crust of snow. The door is small, brightly painted, and facing, if you're paying attention, south. This isn't a house. It's not a tent. It's a jur, or a yurt, depending on who's talking. We'll get into that later. Right now, all you need to know is, this is home. Warm, mobile, ancient, and a quiet act of rebellion against the cruelty of weather. When you duck through the low doorframe, you're met with instant warmth. Not balmy, but undeniably not deadly. A small iron stove sits in the center, puffing gently. Wooden slats curve around the walls like ribs, holding the round structure upright. Felt blankets the frame in overlapping layers, turning what looks like wool pajamas into something that can survive the Siberian Express. You notice a rhythm to the design. Nothing is wasted, no space left unexplored. The sleeping area hugs the back wall. Tools and belongings are hung with minimalist intent. Even the floor has its own logic, thick with rugs and the occasional fur. This isn't improvisation. This is generational engineering. Historians still argue whether yurts developed gradually across Central Asia or emerged as a deliberate invention by early nomadic groups, but most agree they've been around for at least 3,000 years. That's older than most cities, older than roads in some places. They outlasted warlords, empires, and the Cold War. Not bad for a collapsible hut. You sit down on a thick mat and let your bones soak in the heat. Outside, wind gusts across the plains, but inside it's a different universe, one engineered, not just for warmth but for dignity, and the brilliance begins with that structure. Most modern homes are rectangular because that's easy to stack and subdivide, but yurts are round. No corners to trap cold air, no walls to shade each other. The shape isn't just aesthetically pleasing, it's thermodynamically superior for small-scale insulation. Like living inside a thermos flask designed by your ancestors. The crown of the yurt, the circular skylight at the very top, isn't just for drama. It's a vent. Open it and smoke escapes. Close it and heat stays in. Adjustable by hand, often tied to a long string that hangs within reach, it controls your indoor weather like a prehistoric thermostat. The real magic, though, isn't just in how the yurt stands. It's in how it lives. A yurt isn't a shelter you visit after a hard day of hunting. It's part of the rhythm of life on the steppe. Everything from its materials to its shape to its orientation is a survival tactic. Want a quirky tidbit? Mongolian tradition says you must enter a yurt with your right foot first. Why? It's considered disrespectful otherwise. Some say it's about spiritual balance. Others just shrug and say, that's how it's always been. Either way, it's one of many tiny rituals that form the lived reality of yurt life, where everything matters, even your first step inside. As the stove crackles and you lean back, maybe sipping fermented mare's milk if you're brave, you realize something. This isn't minimalist survival. This is maximum adaptability. A shelter built not to dominate nature, but to collaborate with it, move with it, respect it. Out here, there's no room for architectural arrogance. You don't dig a foundation and declare victory over the elements. You build something that understands the wind, the snow, and the sun. And in this first breath of your journey through Mongolian winters, you're just beginning to understand how the yurt, humble and circular, began to outsmart one of the world's harshest climates. Now that you're inside, warm and vaguely hypnotized by the rhythmic ticking of the stove expanding under heat, it's time to really see what's holding this place together. Not just spiritually or socially, though we'll get to those layers, but literally. The bones of the yurt, the frame, the wooden skeleton that takes the wind's wild howl and calmly says, "Not today." You glance upward. The lattice walls, called khana, fan out like a giant accordion, made from dozens of slim wooden slats joined together with rawhide or leather ties. When collapsed, they fold flat like a portable baby gate. When opened, they form a perfect circle. You don't hammer them into the ground or need a building permit. They stand from tension and balance alone, which is more than can be said for that IKEA bookshelf you gave up on. This frame is traditionally made of willow, birch, or sometimes poplar, wood soft enough to shape, strong enough to hold. Trees aren't exactly easy to come by on the steppe, so materials are chosen with careful intent. Every slat counts. Every knot is a signature. You can almost feel the hands that carved them, probably while humming a low song or swatting at summer flies. The doorway is a wooden rectangle, often brightly painted in warm orange tones with swirling blue and green patterns. It's the only hard corner in the entire structure. Everything else curves. Above you, the unis stretch out from the center like sunbeams, thin roof poles angled just right to meet the tuno, the central ring that acts as both skylight and structural keystone. That ring doesn't just look poetic, it is poetic. It holds the yurt together, literally and metaphorically. It's said to represent the sky itself, what your soul passes through after death. No pressure, right? The uni slot into both the ring and the top of the wall lattice. It's done by hand, no screws or nails, just tension and balance. Once in place, they pull against each other, pushing downward while the walls push inward. That tension holds the entire thing upright, like a spider web made of wood and logic. Historians still debate whether this architectural system evolved naturally over centuries or whether it was inspired by older proto-structures in Siberia and Central Asia. Some claim influences from early Iranian nomads or ancient Turkic tribes. Others argue the design was inevitable, a kind of environmental Darwinism where only the most mobile and durable shapes survived. But whoever did it first, they nailed it. Well, figuratively. There aren't actually nails involved. The beauty of this design is in its duality. It's strong and flexible, permanent feeling, yet entirely temporary. The whole frame can be taken down and packed onto 2 camels in under an hour. Maybe even 1 camel if it's been doing CrossFit. You sit and imagine the process. First, the felt coverings are rolled and tied. Then the uni are unhooked one by one, each one slotted into bundles. The crown ring is lifted off carefully. It's heavy and sacred. The lattice walls fold inward like a fan. Each piece is bundled, labeled, wrapped in yak hair rope. It's not chaos. It's choreography. Generations of practice have made it look like a barn raising in reverse, but smoother. Quirky tidbit for you. Some families name their yurts. Not metaphorically, but literally, just like ships. One might be White Eagle or Wind Nest. And no, The yurt doesn't come with a steering wheel or a horn. It's not that kind of ride. What's even more remarkable is how this structure flexes with the weather. In the dry, bitter cold of winter, the felt tightens. The joints constrict. The whole structure becomes snug and tight against the wind. In the summer, when the air gets sticky and thick, the felt loosens a bit, letting the yurt breathe. It's like the house is stretching after a nap, and because the materials are all organic, wood, felt, leather, they shift naturally with the seasons. The yurt isn't a building you live inside. It's a building you live with. There's no concrete, no insulation foam, no fiberglass panels, just ancient math and a few animals who probably didn't sign up to be house parts. Yet somehow it all holds together. Earthquake? The yurt flexes. Blizzard? The yurt holds heat. Windstorm? The yurt doesn't flinch. Tornado? Okay, maybe then it flinches. But mostly it thrives. You can see why this thing never went out of style in Mongolia. Not because they didn't have options, but because they didn't need any. There's a certain stubborn elegance to refusing to upgrade what already works. Remember that frame you're sitting under. Because in the next snowstorm, when you hear the wind clawing at the outside, you'll be grateful for every pole, every knot, every decision made by people who knew this land a lot better than you or I. The fire pops gently. The walls creak slightly as they warm. Outside, a pack of goats trudge past like fluffy meteorologists. Inside, you're wrapped in wood, wool, and wisdom. Now let's talk about the stuff that really keeps you from becoming a popsicle out here. The felt. You wake to the muted glow of daylight bleeding through thick, matted walls. Not bright, not harsh, just soft illumination, like the inside of a woolen cave. The fire has died down, but it's not freezing. Not yet. Because what surrounds you isn't just fabric, it's insulation engineered by centuries of sheep, sweat, and sheer determination. A yurt without felt is like a bed without blankets. You can technically lie there, sure, but you're going to regret all your choices by sunrise. Felt, baz, as it's called in Mongolian, is made from wool, mostly sheep, but occasionally yak or camel. It's thick, dense, and almost unfairly effective. Modern hikers pay good money for high-tech fabrics that barely match what a good sheep and a lot of stomping can accomplish. The making of felt is a full-body activity. It starts with shearing, of course. Then the wool is washed, fluffed, and laid out in large sheets, layered like a lasagna, only hairier. Then the real fun begins. Water is poured over the wool, and then people start rolling it up and walking on it, sometimes for hours. If it's a community effort, kids, adults, and even bored elders will join in, chatting, singing, or arguing about whether last winter was colder. All this stomping compresses the wool, entangling its fibers into a thick, nearly impenetrable mat. Historians still argue whether felt was first discovered by accident, some lost traveler stuffing wool into sandals, or whether early nomads figured it out through slow experimentation. But either way, by the time the Mongolians perfected it, they had turned it into something almost magical. The resulting felt sheets are hefty, not heavy like lead, but weighty like a good quilt. There, draped over the wooden frame in overlapping layers, each one slightly shifted to prevent wind from sneaking through. Multiple layers can be used depending on the season. 2 or 3 in summer, maybe 5 or 6 in winter. This layering method allows air to be trapped between the sheets, adding another level of insulation. It's the same principle that makes down jackets warm. Air gets caught between feathers and fluff. Except here, you're the fluff. Inside the fluff, warm and unbothered. The felt is usually covered with an outer canvas, often made from cotton, or sometimes waterproofed with animal fats or oils. This keeps rain and snow from soaking in, because no matter how fluffy your walls are, wet wool smells like despair. One little known trick. In the harshest months, families would sometimes pack snow on top of the yurt's roof. Yep, more snow, on purpose. The idea was that a thick snow layer would act as additional insulation, like icing on a weird thermal cake. The snow pressed the felt tighter and kept warm air from leaking out. And when the wind blows, and believe me, it always blows out here, the felt barely flutters. It's not light enough to flap. It just holds steady, turning the yurt into a kind of furry bunker. You notice now how silent it is inside. That's no accident either. Felt absorbs sound. So even though the wind is probably screaming outside like an unpaid opera singer, in here, it's muffled. Peaceful. The kind of peace that only comes when you know your walls are literally made from local animals who've already mastered this environment. And speaking of animals, here's a fringe tidbit for you. Camel wool was sometimes reserved for the best yurts. Not because it was warmer, though it is, but because it repelled insects better. Apparently, lice and mites don't care for camel, which makes the camel a kind of unintentional pest control subcontractor. Some yurts, especially those owned by wealthier or higher status families, had decorated outer felts, patterns, natural dyes, and even stitched symbols representing protection or prosperity. One famous design, the ulzi, or endless knot, a motif meant to bring harmony and continuity. Kind of like a mystical post-it note saying, "Hey, remember to stay balanced." Of course, balance is tricky when your walls are breathing. That's right, felt breathes. It allows some airflow while still insulating. That means no condensation, no damp buildup. You're not waking up with damp socks or mildew surprises. The yurt stays dry, which, in a land where frozen boots can snap in half, is a very big deal. You reach out and press a palm to the inner wall. It's warm, not hot, but warmed through from last night's fire. The felt has soaked up heat like a sponge, releasing it slowly through the early morning hours. That's thermal mass, baby. No silicone required. Quirky detail? Some families used to press herbs or grasses into their felt before rolling. This wasn't just decorative. It helped mask the natural scent of sheep, added pleasant aromas, and even deterred pests. Imagine living in a house that smells faintly of lavender and roasted wool. Better than a Yankee candle. You sip something hot, milk tea maybe. The kind that comes pre-salted and utterly confusing if you weren't raised on it. And you realize this whole structure, from wool to warmth, is completely sustainable. Renewable, biodegradable, and off-grid long before off-grid was trendy. There's a word in Mongolian, natsug. It means soft, but also calm. A word that describes not just the texture of the felt, but the mood it creates. Living inside a yurt isn't just about staying alive. It's about staying human, warm, sane, because out there, the world is trying very hard to freeze you. In here, the felt has other plans. You're sitting cross-legged now, toasty under layers of rugs and wool, when something catches your eye. The little stove in the center, its stovepipe angling up through the roof ring like a curious finger pointing to the sky. You've been enjoying its heat for a while, but you haven't really appreciated what's going on here. Because this isn't just a fire in a box, it's a marvel of smoke management and dung ingenuity. Let's start with the fuel. It's not wood. There are no forests for miles. Maybe hundreds of miles. Out here your options are limited, and you take what the land gives you. And what it gives in generous steaming piles is dung. Mostly from cows, yaks, or horses. Sometimes camel, if you're feeling spicy. You grimace at the idea until you realize dried dung burns beautifully. Cleanly even. Low smoke, steady heat. Doesn't crackle like wood, which is great if you're trying to sleep through the night without jolting. Awake every time a log shifts. The dung is carefully collected, dried in the sun and stacked neatly near the yurt, ready to burn through another frigid season. And it's not just stuff you scoop, it's fuel, respected, managed, and chosen. Some nomads even debate which animal produces the best burn. Horse dung is crumbly, good for kindling. Cow dung, though, that's the gold standard. Slow, steady, dependable. Like the crock-pot of nomadic heating. You peer into the stove, where a low, blue-orange glow hums quietly. The stove itself is a squat metal thing, simple, utilitarian, but efficient. It's called a galkni togu, or fire pot, and it's usually made of iron or thick steel, sometimes with makeshift parts welded on over the years. It doesn't have fancy dials or ceramic panels. Just a firebox, a small damper to regulate air, and that stovepipe poking out through the tonneau, the roof ring. Now here's where the real genius happens. The tuno, that sacred skylight you admired earlier, doubles as your exhaust system. Open it and smoke rises effortlessly through the pipe and out into the crisp air. Close it partially, and you trap heat while still letting out just enough smoke to avoid waking up in a hot-boxed sheep cocoon. Historians still argue whether the yurt's smoke venting system originated as a religious adaptation, symbolic of the soul's connection to the sky, or whether it was a purely practical design perfected by trial and smoky error. Either way, it works. And it works better than many early chimneys in medieval Europe, which often just funneled smoke straight into the attic. Charming. A quirky little tip Mongolian families sometimes pass down. If the smoke inside the yurt suddenly starts swirling, strangely, it means someone is thinking or speaking ill of you. A superstition, sure, but when you live in close contact with weather and wool, even the air feels personal. The stove isn't just for heat, it's your kitchen too. Right now there's probably a dented kettle sitting on top, full of milk tea simmering gently, the kind made with green tea, yak milk, salt, and sometimes a bit of butter. Not what you'd serve at brunch in Brooklyn, but after a night surrounded by snow. Liquid salvation. And this tea, called sutetsai, isn't just for sipping. It's the base of meals, used to soften dried meat, soak bread, even feed babies. Everything starts with tea. Everything ends with tea. And the stove is its stage. The yo fire also helps dry things. You'll often see clothing or meat hung above the stove, tied to the beams or dangling from a wooden rack. Nothing goes to waste. The heat is conserved, reused, respected. No one's running around saying, "Let's just turn up the thermostat. You are the thermostat." Want another weird detail? Some yurts have an old horseshoe nailed to the side of the stove. Not for luck, but to bind the fire spirit, making sure it stays tame, predictable. Because out here even fire has moods. Now consider the placement of the stove. It's central, not just spatially, but symbolically. The hearth is the heart. It's where people gather, where food is made, where warmth begins. Children are taught not to step over the stove or play around it. It's sacred, yes, but it's also just common sense when your house is flammable and your fuel is made of digested grass. And because the yurt is round, heat radiates evenly. No corners to trap cold, no edges to hoard warmth. You sit equidistant. From the heat as your brother, your grandmother, your overly judgmental aunt. Everyone shares the same thermal blessing. That's democratic design if ever there was one. Outside, the wind moans again, a lazy, dragging sigh across the land. Snow begins to fall, slow, deliberate flakes like feathers finding their way home. But inside, you could be anywhere. The warmth from the stove melts into your bones. The tea in your mug is a little too salty, a little too perfect. You look up through the stovepipe's path, watching smoke spiral gently out into the sky. No alarms, no vents, just good engineering, and old wisdom, and dung. Don't forget the dung. You blink slowly as the warmth softens your spine. Time feels fuzzy inside a yurt. There's no clock on the wall, just the movement of light and the gentle creak of the felt-covered frame. But now, you're about to do something that makes city dwellers sweat. You're going to pack the entire house. Let's imagine a scene. The sun is barely up. You've had your tea. Your bones are just beginning to loosen from a long night on. Layered rugs and hides. But the clan is moving on. New pastures, fresh water, or maybe just the quiet instinct that says, it's time. This isn't a lease break. This is the rhythm of nomadic life. And you? You're about to collapse your entire home in under an hour, with no nails, no screws, and no power tools. You start by rolling up the rugs and stacking them off to the side. Then the felt. It's peeled off in careful layers like unwinding the fluffiest onion you've ever lived inside. Each sheet is shaken free of frost, folded lengthwise, and bundled with rope made from braided horsehair. The bundles are heavy, but manageable. You've done this before. Then comes the frame. The bones you admired so thoroughly just a few sections ago. The central crown ring, the tuno, is lifted carefully from its post. You need at least 2 people for this. It's sacred, remember? And surprisingly heavy, like lifting a wooden halo. Next, the roof poles, the uni, are gently unhooked one by one from the crown and the walls. Each is wiped down, bundled, labeled. Not literally labeled, there's no barcode scanner, but seasoned hands know which. Poles fit best where. It's a kind of memory passed down through calluses. The lattice walls collapse inward, folding like a concertina. You know those wooden gates they use to keep toddlers from tumbling downstairs? Like that, only large enough to define your entire universe. The folded walls become long, narrow stacks, easy to lash onto the back of a yak or camel, or even a strong horse if you're traveling light. Quirky tidbit: some families mark their wall lattices with tiny notches or symbols, family identifiers, reminders of which wall came from which ancestor. These aren't decorative. They're navigational, spiritual, and emotional all at once. Historians still debate how widespread this symbolic marking was, or if it's more of a modern nostalgia touch, but it certainly happens. Think of it as a memory quilt made out of geometry and tree branches. Back inside, or now just a big empty circle on the grass. The stove is last. It's disassembled, its pipe unscrewed, its body lifted out and wrapped in cloth. It's too precious to leave behind, too essential. Now everything is laid out neatly near your pack animals. Bundles of felt, collapsed wood frames, baskets of belongings. Even the door, that bright hand-painted rectangle, has been pulled from its hinges and wrapped like a precious panel painting. You look around. Where your home stood an hour ago, now there's just a flattened patch of grass and maybe a ring of stones used to keep down the wall skirts. This isn't abandonment, it's transformation. Packing the yurt isn't a sad affair. It's efficient. Yes, practiced. But it's also beautiful in a quiet way, watching your entire shelter become a traveling kit, like a snail regrowing its shell every time it moves. You're not leaving home. You're bringing it with you. And here's where things get really interesting. The same people doing all this. Often children as young as 10 know the steps. Elders supervise, of course, but everyone helps. There's no honey, call the movers. You are the movers. You're also the architect, roofer, and occasionally the motivational speaker when someone drops a felt bundle in a puddle. Now for the punchline: once you arrive at your next location, the whole process happens in reverse. Find a flat spot, maybe near a stream, unroll the felt so it airs out, set up the wall lattices in a circle, insert the door, slot in the roof poles, lift the crown ring, drape the felt like frosting over a cake. Bam, home again. All this in a few hours. Maybe less if no one's dragging their feet or flirting with the neighbor's herder. And because everything is standardized, more or less, you can set up shop anywhere. No blueprints required, no measuring tape. You just know. The way a baker knows when the dough is ready, or a grandmother knows you haven't called in 2 weeks. Want another fringe fact? In traditional Mongolian belief, the act of disassembling a yurt wasn't just logistical, it was spiritual. You're not just moving a house, you're taking apart a circle, a sacred space. So it was common to say a few quiet words before lifting. The tuno, or sprinkle milk as a blessing on the ground. Not flashy rituals, just a whisper of respect. Because the land remembers. You take a last look at the flattened grass where you slept, ate, dreamed. There's no trash left behind. No structural scars. No sign that this place once held heat, stories, or your snoring uncle. Just wind, grazing animals, and the horizon swallowing everything in silence. Then you mount your horse, or your cart, or maybe you just walk, and head toward the next horizon. Your home bouncing gently behind you in bundles. Portable, practical, poetic. Just another day in a world where everything you need can be taken apart, carried, and rebuilt. And no Allen wrench required. The sun climbs just a little higher over the steppe as your caravan begins to settle into a new patch of land. Gently sloped, mostly dry, a good place to stay for a few weeks, maybe a season. And now, it's time to set the yurt back up again. Everything's in bundles, neatly organized. But there's one unbreakable rule you already know to follow before a single wooden slat is raised. The door has to face south, always. You might not know why at first. You might think it's superstition, or just a habit passed down like a favorite dumpling recipe. But the truth is, the rule's rooted in both practicality and deep cultural meaning. Point your doorway the wrong way, and, well, you'll survive. But people will notice, and they'll probably raise an eyebrow. So why south? Well, first, there's the sunlight. South-facing doors catch the warmth of the rising and midday sun, especially important during winter, when every extra ray counts. Your mornings will be brighter. The inside of your yurt will warm faster. And since yurts don't have windows, the door is the main source of light and heat. It's not just for stepping in and out. It's your solar panel in disguise. Second, wind. Cold winds in Mongolia typically blow from the north and northwest. A south-facing entrance keeps the worst of that icy blast from barreling through your door every time someone pops in for tea. It's like ancient feng shui meets practical meteorology. But the real depth behind the direction is spiritual. Traditional Mongolian cosmology divides the yurt interior and its orientation into a symbolic map of the universe. South is associated with the human world, warmth, and hospitality. It's where guests enter. It's the side of openness. The northern side, by contrast, is considered sacred, linked to the heavens, ancestry, and power. The most honored space inside the yurt, the one directly opposite the entrance, is reserved for elders, important guests, or religious objects. Sit there without permission and you'll feel the room get weirdly quiet. You've accidentally wandered into the spiritual VIP section. Historians still argue whether this directional custom predates Tengriism, the ancient sky worship religion of the Mongols, or whether it developed alongside their evolving clan systems. Either way, the result is the same. The door must face south, unless you're trying to confuse your ancestors and your neighbors. You take the painted wooden doorframe from its bundle. It's heavy, a little scuffed from travel, but the patterns still shine through. The swirls, the flame motifs, maybe a pair of stylized phoenixes or deer. It's more than a functional rectangle. It's a statement, a protective threshold. And there's etiquette tied to it too. Never step on the threshold. Just don't. It's one of the oldest, most unspoken rules in yurt culture. That small strip of wood at the base of the doorway. It's sacred. It's a dividing line between the outside world, with its dust, its spirits, its unpredictable weather, and the inner world of calm, warmth, and order. Step over it, always, even if you have to do a weird little dance to make it happen. Quirky. Tidbit. Some families will quietly note if a guest accidentally steps on the threshold. It won't be mentioned aloud, but it'll be remembered, like wearing muddy boots in someone's living room, times 10. With the door frame set firmly in, the rest of the yurt begins to grow around it. Wall lattices unfold and are secured into the frame. The frame is a circle, but the door is the anchor, like a compass pointing toward hospitality. The door also acts as a weather gauge. Some older Mongolian herders swear they can predict a storm, based on how the door creaks or shifts against its frame. If it sticks slightly, wind is coming. If it moans a little when you open it, snow might be on the way. You probably won't find this in a meteorology textbook, but out here, lived experience often trumps data charts. As you attach the crown ring and slot in the roof poles, you notice how everything aligns with the door's position. The center of the yurt faces the door like an eye watching the southern sky. The smoke hole above is angled so it doesn't funnel snow or wind straight into your tea. The inside layout will mirror that direction, with the left and right sides taking on symbolic roles. More on that later. The door faces south because that's where life comes from. The sun rises there. Visitors come from there. Even livestock naturally graze toward it when left to wander. It's the optimistic direction, the future-facing direction. It also makes visits smoother. If your neighbor's door faces the same way, and yours does too, you're both part of the same invisible alignment. No awkward angles or mismatched shadows. Just one big, southern-facing community. Each yurt like a petal turning toward the sun. There's also a theory floating around. Scholars love this one, that south-facing doors helped Mongols coordinate their camps during Genghis Khan's empire days. When you're organizing thousands of yurts in a military encampment, standardizing door direction is kind of a logistics dream. You know who's who, where people are sleeping, and who's breaking. The door threshold rule during late-night raids. You step back now and look at your yurt, half-assembled. The walls curve gently. The poles arc upward like a giant bowl cradling the sky. And at the front, the doorway stands proudly, facing the windless southern light, as if it always knew exactly which way to look. You know now it's not just about heat or wind. It's about alignment, with the land, with your people, with time itself. And tomorrow when you open that door, the sun will greet you like an old friend. Every time. The yurt is standing again now, quiet, round, humble, but somehow majestic in its simplicity. You duck back through the south-facing doorway, careful not to touch the threshold, and step inside. The warmth is beginning to build again as the fire crackles softly in the center. But now you notice something else. Something that wasn't obvious at first, especially if you were too distracted by the stove or the felt or the general awe of not freezing to death. Inside a yurt, nothing is random. Every item, every rug, every pot, blanket, and tool is exactly where it's supposed to be. The layout isn't just cozy, it's coded. It tells you who lives here, how they live, and how they see the world. To your left as you enter, remember, you're coming in from the south, is the men's side. That's where tools are stored. Saddles, ropes, hunting gear, herding equipment. You might see a short bow leaning against the wall, or a well-worn saddle blanket folded with care. This isn't macho decor. It's a functional part of the household. To the right, that's the women's domain. Cooking pots, utensils, stored food, milk buckets, sewing kits, and maybe a spindle of raw wool. You'll find a kettle or two there, perched on a low table or hanging on a hook from one of the roof poles, and perhaps a cup of butter waiting to be churned or spooned into tea. Straight ahead, along the north wall, the most honored part of the yurt, is the place of respect. That's where family heirlooms are kept, photographs of ancestors if the family's more modern, or religious objects, statues of Buddha perhaps, or shamanic bundles, or even just a beautifully patterned rug. This is where guests of honor sit. You don't plop down here unless invited, or unless you're an extremely confident goat. Historians still debate whether this trizonal layout was codified during the Mongol Empire or emerged gradually through centuries of nomadic ritual and necessity. Some suggest it aligns with ancient cosmology, placing masculine and feminine energies in balance on either side of the hearth, anchored by a spiritual center. Others say it's just smart organization, one side for gear, one for food, one for ceremony. Simple as that. But when you live in a single room with your entire family and very few secrets, these invisible lines carry weight. And it's not just about storing objects. People observe these zones too. Men typically sit on the left side, women on the right, children float between, depending on age and mischief level. The northern space, the back wall, is where the family elder sits, or the honored guest. Or if everyone's feeling particularly formal, no one sits there at all unless there's a ceremony. Quirky tidbit: when you enter a yurt, it's polite to move clockwise around the inside. Always clockwise, not counterclockwise. No one wants that energy. Even the fire in the stove follows this rhythm, curling upward in soft clockwise spirals. It's like the whole yurt is part of one big circular dance, and you're just learning the steps. You sit now on a thick rug woven with deep red and ochre patterns, noticing how the center of the yurt, the hearth, anchors the entire space. Everything radiates from it, both physically and socially. Meals are served in that orbit. Stories are told in its glow. Children tumble around its edges, always just close enough to feel safe, never so close as to get scorched. The fire divides the two halves of the household without needing a wall, and it joins them too. Everyone needs heat. Everyone stirs the tea. No one owns the stove. Even the bedrolls, folded now against the wall, have their place. Family members sleep in positions tied to age and role, elders near the sacred back wall. Younger children closer to the door, where they can dart out for nighttime chores or just look at the stars when they can't sleep. And that's the thing about yurt interiors. It's a system of subtle negotiations. Where you place your boots, where you sit, where you leave your bowl. None of it is dictated by a rule book. But everyone just knows. It's a choreography of courtesy. Now imagine this. A guest arrives. You open the door, south-facing naturally, and in comes a windburned traveler. They remove their hat, always polite, step over the threshold and sit exactly where you expect. To the left, near the door, unless you beckon them deeper. You offer tea. They accept. Maybe you share dried curds or bortsog, those crispy fried dough bites that crackle under your teeth. And without saying much, both of you move through the interior with the kind of silent fluency that makes architects jealous. There's no TV, no room divider, no hallway to escape into if the conversation gets awkward. Just the round room, the stove, the layers of felt, and this unspoken logic that keeps everything in balance. Want a fringe theory? Some anthropologists believe the circular layout of the yurt encourages social harmony. No sharp corners to isolate. No back room for secrecy. Everyone is visible. Everyone is accountable. It's not utopia, but it does subtly nudge you toward gentler behavior. Hard to yell at someone when you're sitting knee to knee, sipping the same tea. You stretch your legs, now fully understanding that you're not just inside a shelter. You're inside a worldview. One where space is shared, purposefully arranged, and deeply tied to identity. There's no closet to hide mess in, no office to escape to, just one open breathing room, everything in its place. And somehow, with all that structure, you feel freer. You've been getting cozy calling this place a yurt. But maybe you've noticed something strange. Mongolians don't really use that word. Not when speaking Mongolian anyway. What they say is gur, and that opens a soft little linguistic rabbit hole. You're sipping your salty tea again, staring at the warm circle around you, and suddenly you wonder, why do we call it a yurt if the people who live in them don't? It's like showing up at a sushi bar and ordering fish rice discs with confidence. The word yurt actually comes from the Turkic languages, particularly Russian and Kazakh use. In Russian, yurta refers to the whole structure, just like in English. It spread westward through travel journals, military reports, and those delightfully dry 19th century explorers who discovered things people had been living in for centuries. Meanwhile, in Mongolia, the word is gur, a softer sound, just one syllable, as comfortable and rounded as the structure itself. Gur simply means home. That's it. Not fancy round sheep shelter, just home. The difference isn't just about vocabulary, it reflects how outsiders and insiders see the same thing. To the traveler, a yurt is an exotic structure, a feat of nomadic engineering, maybe even a trendy Airbnb experience with fairy lights and composting toilets. But to the people living in them, it's the place you were born, the place you argue over soup, the place you fold laundry and mourn your grandparents. It's not a curiosity. It's the baseline of reality. Historians still argue whether the term yurt became dominant in the West due to colonial-era travel writing or Soviet-era mapping projects. Some think early anthropologists preferred yurt because it sounded more mysterious, something to study, not live in. Others believe it stuck simply because Russian influence in the region was so strong for so long. Either way, the result is a naming mismatch, a jur in Mongolia, a yurt everywhere else. But don't worry, you won't offend anyone by saying yurt. It's just one of those linguistic quirks that gently reminds you you're looking at the same object through two cultural windows. Here's a fun tidbit. In Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan, yurts, yurt, take on a whole different layer of symbolism. There, the roof ring, the tunduk, is often used as a national emblem. You'll find it on flags, coins, government logos. It represents heritage, unity, and the central hearth of the nation. Basically, the yurt isn't just home, it's homeland. In Tsiu. Mongolia, though, the gyr stays humble. You don't fly it on flags. You just respect it in your daily rhythms. You look around the inside again, now seeing how deep that humility runs. No part of the gyr is flashy. It's beautiful, yes, but not designed to impress. It's designed to work, move, and endure. You see that even the poles and frame differ slightly across regions. Kazakh yurts tend to be taller, with steeper roofs. Kyrgyz yurts are a bit wider at the base. Mongolian gyrs stay low and compact, built for wind resistance and quick assembly. That might sound like splitting hairs, but out on the open plain, tiny differences matter. The shape of the roof can determine how fast heat escapes, how snow slides off, how well a horse can nudge it with its nose without knocking it over. All important questions, clearly. And here's a curious little fringe fact. In parts of Western Mongolia, where Kazakh communities live, you might find hybrid gyrs, part Mongolian, part Kazakh, depending on the family lineage. These structures blur the lines between form and label. Is it a gyr? Is it a yurt? Yes. But whatever the word, the logic remains the same. Portable, warm, and woven into everyday life. You shift on your cushion and think about how rare it is, in the modern world, to live in something so named by context. In English, we call it a house, whether it's a Victorian, a condo, or a McMansion. But here, language still carries memory. Calling it a gyr places you inside an ancestral line. It connects you to herders who moved the same doorframe across the same wind-scrubbed land 1,000 years ago. The word gyr holds more than letters. It holds breath, family, seasons, the hush of snow tapping on felt at night. And so maybe, just maybe, you'll whisper that word next time you see one in a travel magazine. A quiet syllable that means so much more than tent. A word that feels lived in, like a worn rug, or a well-traveled kettle. So go ahead. Keep calling it a yurt, if that's what you're used to. But now you know. To the people inside, it's always been a gyr, and it always will be. You pull the door closed behind you, felt muffling the soft clunk, and settle back into the round warmth of the gyr. Maybe it's the tea, or maybe it's the low hypnotic crackle of the fire, but your thoughts drift to a question that keeps whispering at the edge of your curiosity. Did Genghis Khan sleep here? Not in this particular gyr, of course, unless he time-traveled and decided to crash your bedtime history session. But did he sleep in a gyr? Was his yurt anything like this? 1. And how did a humble nomadic shelter become the heart of an empire that stretched from the Pacific to the Danube? Well, yes, he did. And no, it wasn't quite like this. By the time Temujin, later known as Genghis Khan, rose to power in the early 13th century, the gyr was already the default home of Mongol herders. He grew up in one, slept under one, through bitter winters, likely helped pitch and pack it alongside his family as they followed their herds. The circular mobile gyr wasn't a symbol of poverty. It was a way of life. The only life. But when Genghis rose from tribal leader to Khagan of the largest contiguous empire in world history, things changed. And so did the gyr. Wealthier Mongols, especially nobility and military commanders, began to upgrade their gyrs into something grander. Enter the ordu, or royal yurt. Think of it as a gyr on steroids, larger, taller, often painted, carved, gilded, still round, still portable, but now accompanied by retinues of servants, guards, and ox-drawn carts just to haul the thing across the grasslands. One famous account from a Persian historian describes a royal gyr mounted on an enormous cart pulled by 22 oxen. It moved slowly, like a turtle with ambition, and acted as a rolling command center. Wherever the Khan stopped, so did his palace. Historians still argue whether these rolling yurts were practical for battle logistics or mostly symbolic, a demonstration of power and presence. Some say they functioned like mobile courts. Others believe they served religious or diplomatic purposes. Whatever the case, they were not your average tea-sipping sheepfold. But the essential structure remained the same. Lattice walls, roof poles, felt, and a tuno. Even Genghis Khan's imperial gyr followed the same basic blueprint. Because when something works, you don't reinvent it, you elevate it. Quirky tidbit? The tuno, that central roof ring, was often carved or painted with elaborate designs in these royal yurts, sometimes even inlaid with precious metals or wrapped in silk. One record from the Yuan dynasty, which followed the Mongol Empire in China, describes yurts so extravagant they were mistaken for temples. Yet even in this opulence, mobility was key. Genghis wasn't building castles. He didn't want to rule from a throne nailed to stone. He needed to move, fast, far, unpredictably. The jur allowed him to lead an empire without abandoning his roots. A literal case of carrying your culture on your back. And it wasn't just him. His generals, wives, advisors, all lived in variations of the jur. During military campaigns, they could pack up entire courts and communities and move hundreds of miles in a matter of days. While European kings argued over castle plumbing, Mongol leadership was warming its toes in yurts somewhere outside Kiev. You imagine it now, a royal encampment stretching for miles. Dozens, maybe hundreds of gurs dotting the plain, smoke curling upward like incense to the gods of sky and steppe. Horses picketed in neat rows. Guards standing beside enormous wooden carts bearing royal yurts that swayed like domes on wheels. And in the center, the Khan's own jur, richly adorned, but still. A jur, one room, one fire, one roof ring to the heavens. What's even more remarkable is that this wasn't a phase. The tradition didn't vanish when the Mongols settled parts of China or Persia. Even emperors from the Yuan dynasty, who built palaces in Beijing, kept yurts inside palace courtyards, like a retreat, a familiar womb of wool and wood to remind them of who they were. And today, Mongolian presidents still receive foreign guests in ceremonial jurs, not out of nostalgia, but as a statement. This is who we are. This is where we came from. You might have skyscrapers, we have sky rings. Want another quirky fact? Genghis Khan's daughters, yes, he had several highly influential daughters, were often gifted their own jurs as part of marriage alliances or political rewards. These weren't just dowry items, they were portable seats of power. A daughter with a jur and a herd could rule a region, command loyalty, and outmaneuver rivals. Move over, Game of Thrones. You lean back again and realize this thing you're sitting in, round, wool-wrapped and warm, isn't just a home. It's a design that once housed the most feared military leaders on Earth. And it's the same design shepherds use today to house snoring uncles and kettles of salted tea. That continuity is rare. Few inventions last a century, let alone a millennium, without major changes. But the jur? It hasn't just endured, it's conquered. And as you listen to the wind outside and the gentle clink of a pot lid on the stove, you think, Genghis Khan definitely slept here, and probably very well. So here you are, settled inside your jur. The fire is steady, and the wind is doing that moaning whistle thing it does at dusk. Outside, the world is a blur of frost and wide skies, but inside, everything is thick with comfort and routine. And now that you've gotten the hang of this whole structure, the bones, the felt, the fire, and the symbolism, it's time to peek into a night during the depths of winter. Not the romanticized version, the real one. A Mongolian winter doesn't arrive with a polite chill. It arrives with a full-body slap. Temperatures can drop below 40 to go, 40 to go, and that's without wind chill. Eyelashes freeze. Boiled water thrown into the air turns to snow mid-flight. Vehicles refuse to start. Entire herds must be monitored constantly to keep them from freezing, starving, or wandering into a blizzard in search of imaginary grass. And yet, people not only live here, they laugh, sing, raise children, and play games inside these little, round miracles of insulation. Tonight's going to be one of those bone-snappingly cold nights. But inside, the jur is a scene of quiet resilience. The stove has been loaded with dried dung. A small pile of cakes and rock-hard cheese sits on a low table. The family has already tucked into dinner, meat stew maybe, thick with flour and mystery spices, warmed in a single pot. The smell clings to the felt in the most satisfying way, and once the chores are done, fire fed, animals checked, felt battened down, it's time to do something that surprises most visitors. Play. Winter. Evenings inside a gyr are often filled with quiet fun. No one's scrolling their phone, no one's glued to a glowing screen. Instead, The family gathers on thick rugs and plays traditional games. One favorite is shagai, played with the ankle bones of sheep. That's right, tiny bones, polished, and saved, each one shaped just enough to land with a distinct side up. They're like animal dice, and you can use them for a whole range of games, flicking contests, racing setups, or luck-based bets. The four sides, horse, camel, sheep, goat, each have their own point values or symbolic meanings. You flick the bones, try not to wake Grandpa snoring in the north seat, and quietly marvel at the fact that these tiny, clacking bones have entertained people for centuries. Cheap, portable, surprisingly addictive. Want a fringe detail? Mongolian children often carry a few shagai in their pockets like lucky charms. It's believed that a good throw in shagai might translate to real-life fortune. Maybe more sheep, better weather, or a peaceful ride the next morning. Historians still argue whether shagai was always a child's game or if it once held deeper, divinatory power, akin to fortune-telling bones found in ancient Chinese and Siberian rituals. Either way, it's still a mainstay of winter evenings across the steppe. And it's not just games. Music fills the air too. Songs passed down through generations. One person might hum a low tune, while another picks out a melody on a morankur, the traditional horsehead fiddle. Its deep, slightly mournful notes fill the small space like incense. No amplifier, no effects pedals. Just the hum of gut strings and memory. The music isn't always sad. Some songs are playful. Others tell long, epic stories of love, betrayal, heroic horses, clever herders, or annoying in-laws. It's a form of oral history, folded into rhythm and rhyme, taught by repetition rather than lectures. And when the fire dies down and people begin to drift towards sleep, layers of quilts and furs are rolled out. Everyone sleeps on the floor, side by side, not because they have to, but because it's warm, efficient, social. Babies sleep between parents, elders closer to the fire. The family becomes one big human sandwich wrapped in wool and habit. You know, might think it'd feel cramped, but somehow it doesn't. The round shape of the gyr seems to soften the closeness. The gentle curve of the walls feels less like confinement and more like protection. Quirky detail. In deep winter, some families lay hot stones near the fire, wrap them in cloth, and tuck them under their bedding. It's DIY bed heating, nomad style. A centuries-old hot water bottle, minus the bottle, plus geology. As you lie back, your breath misting softly in the space above your nose, you hear the fire ticking in its final glow. You hear someone mumble in their sleep. Maybe a dog sighs. Near the door, curled up on a fur mat, and you realize this is winter survival, yes, but it's also winter living. Inside the gyr, people aren't just hunkering down waiting for spring. They're playing, singing, cooking, laughing. The structure supports not just their bodies, but their spirits. It offers more than warmth. It offers rhythm, familiarity, ritual. The outside world might be howling, but in here, surrounded by bones, felt, games, and stories, it's quiet. It's warm. It's home. And you, tucked into the silence, feel something you didn't expect. You're not just impressed, you're comfortable. Morning comes late in a Mongolian winter. The light creeps in slowly, filtered through the thick layers of felt and the faint smoke still curling from the stove. But even before the sky turns fully gray-blue, you hear movement. A cough. The clink of a ladle against a kettle. A shuffle of boots near the door, and outside, something's already underway. Felt making. That's right. Those walls you've been praising all night? They didn't appear magically from sheep and wishes. They were made. And not just once. They're maintained, patched, replaced, and, in the warmer seasons, made fresh from scratch and felt. As it turns out, is a team sport. Imagine this. A group of women, maybe a few older children too, gathering around a massive rectangle of carded wool laid out on a tarp outside. It's been washed, sorted, and fluffed until it resembles a storm cloud the size of a small car. The wool is layered evenly, almost like pastry dough, only this one smells like sheep and ambition. Next comes the water, hot, often with soap or fermented milk added to help break down the fibers. The wool is thoroughly soaked. Then the entire thing is rolled up around a long pole like a jelly roll the size of a canoe. Then, here's the magic. It's time to roll. Literally. Several people begin to roll and stomp on the bundle. They walk on it, dance on it, sometimes sing as they work. The idea is simple. Pressure plus moisture plus friction. Felt, and it works. After hours of rhythmic stomping and unrolling and re-rolling, the wool fibers begin to fuse together into a single thick, dense sheet. Historians still argue whether this technique originated in Mongolia or spread from the early herding cultures of the Altai or Central Asia, but either way, the Mongols made it their own. They understood wool at a cellular level. They didn't just shear sheep, they engineered walls. Quirky tidbit. One traditional technique involved hitching the felt roll to a horse and dragging it across the steppe while kids jumped on it for extra weight. It turned the whole thing into a kind of woolen amusement ride, efficient and entertaining. Once the felt is formed, it's dried in the sun. Sometimes dyed with natural pigments, red clay, onion skin, or crushed plants. Patterns may be added, often geometric or symbolic. Protection, abundance, harmony. But even plain felt, thick and gray, is a kind of triumph, because this isn't just insulation, it's survival, and it's heavy. One large sheet can weigh over 80 pounds when dry, and more when wet. You don't hang it casually over your arm. You heave it like a grown toddler made of clouds. But every family has their rhythm, their songs, their stomp style. It's part craft, part ritual, and while felt making is labor-intensive, it's also social. A good session might include shared food, gossip, teasing, or even a surprise wrestling match among the kids while the elders look on, half scolding, half smiling. Inside the jur, smaller felt items are constantly being made or repaired. Rugs, wall hangings, saddle pads, even baby cradles. Felt is soft yet firm, warm yet breathable. It bends but doesn't tear. It absorbs moisture without becoming swampy. It's like wool figured out how to become a superhero. You now understand why felt isn't just material. It's a tradition, a seasonal event, a bond that connects generations, a literal fabric of society. And felt also holds memory. Some older pieces, even after they're patched a dozen times, are never thrown away. They're tucked under new layers, hidden inside bedrolls, or used to wrap delicate items. Not because they're still structurally sound, but because they belong to someone. A grandmother, an uncle, a sister who passed away last winter. Fringe fact, it's not uncommon for pieces of a deceased family member's gear, especially felt from the roof, to be kept as talismans, reminders, or even offerings, like heirlooms made of warmth and wool. You go outside now, bundled tightly against the way, cold, and watch the felt team at work. Their boots leave shallow prints in the frost. Their laughter puffs in little clouds. The giant felt roll is mid-process, already halfway to becoming part of someone's future yurt. And in that moment, you feel it. How something so physical, so simple, can also be so personal. This isn't factory work. It's intimate, local, alive. Tomorrow, that same felt might be stretched across a new gear, someone's first home, or a couple's wedding gift, or maybe just a fresh layer for a structure that's already stood through 7 winters and 5 dust storms. You step back inside your jur, brushing frost from your boots. The warmth hits you again, thick, slow, reliable. You glance at the wall, now knowing how much went into it. Not just sheep and time, but footsteps, voices, memory. The jur doesn't just protect you. It remembers you, and that's the real strength of felt. You've seen the G-air go up and come down. You've warmed by the stove and stomped on wool like a local. But now comes a logistical puzzle you didn't know you needed an answer to. How on earth do you carry all this, if you've been picturing a couple of neat little travel bags strapped to a camel's hump like some tidy backpacking setup? I have news. This house is not light. The frame alone, wooden slats, roof poles, crown ring, weighs as much as 2 grown men. The felt, a ton of sheep, literally. And the stove, bless it, is basically a portable iron furnace. Enter the camel. But here's the trick. Not just any camel. Bactrian camels. Two humps, shaggy fur, and a general vibe of world weariness. They are the freight trucks of the steppe. Big enough to carry a disassembled gyr, sure, but also famously stubborn. You want to see patience tested? Watch someone try to load a full winter gyr onto a camel who's decided today is not the day. Here's what usually happens. The gear is bundled, felt, poles, door frame, stove, tools, and then grouped by weight. One side of the camel gets the lattice wall sections, lashed tightly. The other side gets the rolled felt and maybe the stove components. The crown ring, usually heavy and awkwardly shaped, is strapped to the very top. It's a slow, careful process, because one shift in balance, and the whole load might tip mid-journey. And camels hate that. Quirky tidbit. There's an old Mongolian joke that goes, if your camel sits before you've tied the crown ring, you'll be unpacking in the same place tomorrow. Because once a camel sits down, especially under protest, it can refuse to get back up for hours. Sometimes, days. No amount of coaxing, singing, or bribing with dry grass will change its mind. Historians still argue whether camels were always the preferred animal for yurt transport, or if horses and oxen were once more common in earlier centuries. Some evidence suggests that ox-drawn carts were a staple of large clan migrations. But in the harshest terrains, desert steppe, high mountains, freezing plateaus, the camel reigns supreme. And it's not just their strength, it's their memory. Camels know their routes, know the difference between good grazing and bad, know which rivers will flood in the spring and which passes are safe in a snowstorm. A good camel isn't just transport. It's GPS, SUV, and weather app all in one. You watch now as a family loads their caravan. 2 camels for the main gyr components, a third for kitchenware, clothing bundles, and a small child or two who clearly drew the short straw on walking duty. The mother adjusts the ropes, checking that the felt roll doesn't rub too hard against the animal's ribs. The father tightens the saddle straps. The camels grunt, loudly. Their facial expressions suggest they've read all your emails and are unimpressed. And here's another clever detail. Many herder families use yurts, a kind of padded cradle for delicate items, especially during cold seasons. It's usually made from shaped leather, sometimes wrapped in wool. Inside, anything from a tea kettle to a newborn goat. Because if it's worth carrying, it's worth cushioning. Now, what happens if you have no animals? You carry it yourself. Yes, really. Smaller families, especially those with fewer animals or tight herding routes, sometimes transport their yurts in pieces, on their backs, or using hand carts dragged across dry land. It's exhausting, slow, and deeply humbling, but doable. Because the gyr, in its heart, is built for movement. With the right pacing and teamwork, even humans can carry home. Want a fringe fact? Some nomads built tiny gyrs, miniature versions, used during long migrations. They'd be set up for kids to nap in or for tea breaks. Just one layer of felt, a miniature stove, and a whole lot of charm, like the pop-up campers of the ancient world. Of course, once your caravan is moving, it's not a straight line across the grass. The terrain decides everything. You weave around frozen rivers, jagged rocks, steep ridges. You pause when the sun hits a certain angle and the wind shifts. Sometimes you camp halfway and set up only part of the gyr, just enough for shelter. A kind of nomadic halfway house. And all the while, the camels grunt. The children sing or bicker or nap in their woolen bundles. The wind keeps its endless commentary, dragging clouds like slow ships across the sky. You realize then that moving a gyr isn't just a physical task, it's an art. One part engineering, one part weather reading, and a whole lot of relationship. Management with camels who clearly think they should be in charge. But when the caravan stops and the gyr is rebuilt again, even on some nameless stretch of grass, you feel it. The return to circle. The magic of walls forming from bundles, of warmth rekindling inside felt, of home appearing once again out of nowhere. And as the camels finally sit down, grudgingly, but with dignity, you tip your imaginary hat to them. Because, without them, you'd be sleeping in the snow, your stove somewhere on the horizon, strapped to a creature that still hasn't forgiven you for that crown ring incident. You're sitting near the fire again, The tea is slightly too salty, and someone has just offered you a slab of dried cheese that could be used as a blunt weapon. Everything feels routine, peaceful even, but don't let the quiet fool you. There are rules here, invisible ones, strange ones, and breaking them won't get you arrested, but it might earn you a reputation as that guest. Because living in a yurt isn't just about warmth, it's about respect. The space itself has expectations. And if you ignore them, well, things get awkward fast. For starters, don't whistle inside. You heard me. Whistling in a yurt is believed to attract evil spirits, or, if you're feeling metaphorical, misfortune. You may think it's just an innocent little tune, but suddenly grandma's giving you side-eye, and the fire starts popping weirdly, and now everyone's uncomfortable. Why this taboo? Historians still debate the origins. Some link it to shamanic traditions, where whistling was used to summon spirits on purpose. Others think it's a holdover from a time when high-pitched sounds were believed to mimic the voices of the dead. Either way, don't do it. Hum if you must, but keep your lips zipped. Next up, never point your feet toward the stove, or toward elders, or religious objects. In Mongolian culture, the feet are considered low, both literally and symbolically. They're associated with dirt, impurity, and the practical business of walking across yak droppings. Pointing your toes toward someone, or something sacred, is a bit like flipping the bird, only softer, and with warmer socks. So how do you sit? Cross-legged is a safe bet, or knees tucked politely to the side. Anything that keeps your feet from becoming a statement piece. Quirky tidbit: if you accidentally nudge someone with your foot, totally possible in a compact space, you should immediately offer your hand as a gesture of apology. A silent "my bad" in the universal language of toes. Now imagine this. You're invited into a gyr for dinner. You duck through the low door, right foot first always, and once you're inside, the host offers you a bowl of milk tea. Great. Fantastic. Except, you reach out with your left hand. Oops. Always accept food and drink with your right hand, or with both hands. The right hand is associated with respect, purity, action. The left? It's fine for scratching your ear or holding a bowl of curds once you're already eating. But offering, accepting, or pouring with the left alone, that'll get you some arched eyebrows and possibly a passive-aggressive biscuit. Now let's say you're seated, you've followed all the rules, and you're feeling confident. Don't get cocky, because then you'll try to lean against one of the wooden roof poles. Don't. Those poles, the uni, aren't just structural, they're symbolic. They hold up the tuno, the roof ring, which connects the family to the sky. Leaning on them is seen as lazy at best, disrespectful at worst. It's like casually draping yourself across someone's family altar and asking what's for dinner. Historians still argue whether these customs are purely practical, reinforcing politeness in tight quarters, or whether they stem from deeper, spiritual ideas about balance, energy, and sacred space. Probably both. And when you live in one room, everything is a boundary. Fringe detail? You should also never walk between the two central poles, supporting the roof ring unless invited. That space is spiritually charged. It's like the aisle in a cathedral, used during rituals, formal visits, or when you really need to add wood to the fire. It's not your personal shortcut. You sip your tea now, cautiously, wondering if there are more rules. There are. Don't wear a hat indoors unless it's very cold or you're of advanced age. Don't raise your voice. Don't comment on how small the place is. And for the love of felt, don't stare into someone's cooking pot. That's just rude. Still, for all these do's and don'ts, the GER isn't a rigid place. It's not a monastery. It's flexible, warm, and welcoming, just with a firm sense of spatial etiquette. Like a grandmother who smiles sweetly while smacking your hand away from the cookie jar. And these customs? They're passed down quietly. No signs on the wall. No laminated visitor guides. You just learn by watching, mimicking, being gently corrected when your foot ends up pointed at a sacred bundle. There's a comfort in that, a rhythm, because the rituals aren't about restriction, they're about harmony. In a space this small, every action has impact. Every gesture carries weight. And when done right, everything moves like a quiet dance. You look around and notice it now, how guests are seated in a natural order, how food is passed in slow arcs, never over someone's head, how even the youngest child avoids stepping on the threshold. No one's being policed, no one's scolding you, but everyone's participating in this quiet choreography of respect. And you, just by being here, are learning it too. So you shift your legs, tuck your feet politely, and accept your next cup of tea with both hands. No whistling, no leaning, no problem. The gyr, for all its ancient elegance, doesn't exist in a time bubble. You step outside one morning and realize something has changed. Not the sky, which is still huge and mostly indifferent, or the ground, which is frozen solid as usual. No, it's what's on the gyr. Satellite dish. Yep, a small, round, modern eye staring up at the heavens, mounted right onto the side of the felt. You blink, half expecting it to be a prank, but there it is, wired into a generator humming near the door. And next to it, a solar panel, catching the pale morning light like it's trying to charge up for a Netflix binge. This isn't the 13th century anymore. Mongolian life on the steppe has shifted, not away from the GER, but within it. Adaptation, it turns out, doesn't mean replacement. It means plugging in. Let's rewind a little. During the 20th century, especially under Soviet influence, Mongolia underwent rapid and complicated changes. Urbanization was encouraged. Sedentarization. Campaigns pushed nomadic families into apartment blocks. Collectivized herding replaced family-based pasturing. The gyr, though never banned, was suddenly seen as old-fashioned, a relic, but it never disappeared. Even in cities like Ulaanbaatar, people continued living in gyrs. You can walk through districts called gyr districts, where the round structures sit beside paved roads and concrete high-rises. They're hooked up to electricity, have Wi-Fi, and sometimes even mini fridges humming next to the stove. One wall might hold a Buddhist shrine, the other, a flat-screen TV playing Korean dramas. Historians still argue whether this urban gyr phenomenon is a sign of cultural resilience or of infrastructure failure. After all, many of these areas lack proper plumbing or centralized heating. But most agree the GR isn't just surviving, it's evolving. In rural areas, the story is even more interesting. Herder families still move with the seasons, still live in gyrs, but now they have solar panels strapped to the roof. These panels power LED lights, phone chargers, maybe a small radio. Some families have portable generators for a couple hours of television at night. Fringe fact: there's a growing number of herders who check livestock health via mobile apps, call vets using solar-charged phones, and even use drones to monitor distant herds. The camel has competition, and while it might seem jarring, an ancient wool dome covered in 21st century tech, somehow it works. The GR accepts the updates, as long as they fit the rhythm of its roundness. Take the stove, for example. In many modern gyrs, the traditional iron stove has been swapped out for a steel one, with more efficient heat distribution, or one with a small chimney fan to better vent smoke. Some even use electric heaters, though only when the power supply cooperates, which is not always. You step inside a more modern gyr now and see it for yourself. The layout is familiar. Men's, tools to the left, kitchen items to the right, sacred space at the back. But there's a power strip tucked beneath the edge of a rug. A USB cable snakes past a tea kettle. A child lies on a mat watching cartoons on a tablet, the glow of animation flickering against the wooden roof poles. It's not a contradiction, it's a conversation. Ancient shapes speaking to modern needs. You sip tea, still salty, still excellent, and notice something else. This gyr is warmer, better sealed, newer felts maybe, a stove with a tighter door. Or maybe it's just the quiet whir of a solar battery charging in the corner, making sure the family doesn't miss the weather report. Quirky tidbit. During national celebrations, you'll see gyrs lit up with string lights powered by car batteries, or portable solar units. One researcher called it nomadic Christmas, though the locals just call it practical and kind of fun. And then there's internet access. It's patchy, it's slow, but it's there. And for many herder families, that tiny Wi-Fi signal is a lifeline. Kids use it for school, parents for checking weather reports. Some even use Facebook or WeChat to stay in touch with distant relatives, or to post incredibly aesthetic photos of their yurt interiors, complete with caption, "Ichak Gerlife." That digital presence has become a way to bridge identities, to be modern and traditional, to exist both in motion and online. You sit back and reflect on this strange blend. The sacred door still faces south. The fire is still central. The felt still carries the weight of seasons. But now, there's a power bank charging, in the corner. Maybe a solar lantern shaped like a little yurt. And the beauty is, nothing essential has been lost. Because the GR wasn't ever just a thing, it was a practice. A shape that worked, a logic that traveled, a philosophy of living that doesn't fear a plug socket. Adaptation doesn't dilute the culture. It keeps it alive, flexible, relevant. Even if there's a weather app on the stove and a sheep-shaped Wi-Fi router hanging from a roof pole. So the next time you see a photo of a Mongolian yurt with a satellite dish, don't chuckle. That's not contradiction. That's evolution. It's morning again, and you're stepping outside for what might be the last time this season. The wind has changed. Less bitter, more brisk. There's movement across the land. Animals stirring, people chatting, bundles being loaded. It's migration time again. But before you leave, there's one more thing to notice. Something easy to overlook in all the grand talk of empires, fire pits, and dung-fueled stoves. The GR is trendy now. Not just in Mongolia. Globally. You've seen them pop up in unexpected places. Off-grid eco-lodges, wellness retreats, hipster campgrounds, backyard yoga dens. The GR has gone global, and the world has taken notice. But let's slow that down. Because this part of the story is a little strange. How something ancient, built from felt and firewood, quietly became a design darling. At first it started with the outdoor crowd, people craving a back-to-nature experience without quite giving up their creature comforts. Gotta have that composting toilet. Gotta have fairy lights. So they looked around and asked, what kind of shelter is portable, cozy, and aesthetically pleasing? Enter the yurt. Yes, the yurt, because that's still the word most of the world uses for these homes. It was perfect, circular, insulated, romantic, but also deeply practical. No corners, no nonsense. Tiny home enthusiasts swooned. Design blogs ran features on round living. Suddenly yurts were being built from high-tech canvas, bamboo poles, weather-treated wood. Some came with skylights and solar panels. Others boasted Wi-Fi, induction stoves, and rainwater harvesting systems. A few had built-in record players and hammocks slung diagonally across their interiors, like a Pinterest board had wandered into a GR and never left. You can now rent yurts in New Zealand, Portugal, the Catskills, and Iceland. Some cost more per night than a high-end hotel. Some even come with hot tubs. Genghis Khan might have had an empire, but he probably didn't have a cedar-soaking tub with mountain views. And while it's easy to roll your eyes, here's the real surprise. This modern trend is, at its heart, an acknowledgement of how good the original idea really was. Because while Western designers might add a few bells and whistles, the bones haven't changed. It's still round, still self-supporting, still breathable. Still grounded in the idea of flexible living, of belonging more to the land than to walls. Historians still argue whether this popularity is a form of cultural appreciation or appropriation. Some say modern yurts strip away the context, turning sacred architecture into Instagram content. Others argue that as long as it's respectful and credited, there's no harm in sharing good ideas. Fringe fact: some Mongolian artisans have started selling authentic yurt kits internationally. Hand-painted doors, wool felt rolls, full lattice frames. It's not cheap, but it's the real thing. Shipped with instructions, and often a quiet hope that users will understand what it means to build a house without nails. But inside Mongolia, the GR hasn't become passé. It's not some relic dusted off for tourists. It's still very much a living form. Families still use them every day in every season, urban or rural, old school or solar powered. They're symbols of continuity, not nostalgia. You glance back at your yurt now. Maybe it has a satellite dish. Maybe the tea was reheated in a microwave balanced on a wool rug. But the shape, the bones, all the same. The door still faces south. The fire still warms the center, and the circle still holds. There's something timeless about that. Something calming. Like no matter how fast the world changes, how many apps, devices, deliveries, and disruptions, we might still need a round room, a warm stove, and a sky ring overhead to bring us back to balance. So maybe that's the lesson here. Not that the yurt is trendy, but that it never stopped being right. And as you step back in one last time, letting the soft hush of wool and wood swallow the outside world, you know, the yurt isn't just a shelter, it's a shape for living. You're warm now. The fire has burned low, and the world outside your little circular shelter is quiet. Just the wind humming faintly and the soft rustle of felt settling into its familiar folds. You've walked the snowy plains, sipped tea by the stove, and seen a world both ancient and alive. Take a moment now and feel the shape around you. No edges, no angles, just soft curves and quiet air. The kind of space that holds you without demanding anything. The kind that makes you breathe slower without noticing. Even in the coldest wind, the yurt holds steady. It's not a fortress. It's a companion. Built not to fight the world, but to move with it. So as your thoughts begin to quiet, and the sky above your tuno dims into starlight, you can let your shoulders drop. Let your breathing soften. You're safe here. You're held. Maybe you can still hear the faint sounds of the steppe, a goat snuffling outside, the sigh of a sleeping camel, a pot lid clicking as the last of the heat fades. Or maybe it's just the silence now, wrapping around you like wool. Let that silence carry you. Let the roundness of the world cradle your thoughts, and let sleep slow and gentle come find you inside this circle of warmth. Your home.